Good morning, friends.
Hello.
Welcome to Coffee Talk with Ashley and Locke.
Where the camera is conveniently angled to leave me out of it. Thank you for that, honey.
I was trying to press the buttons.
Yeah. Whatever you say. Yes, dear.
Buttons.
All right. You want to explain why we're actually on the same feed instead of talking to each other separately?
Crazy. We are away on alone time. We went away yesterday to love each other and get alone.
You make that sound kind of weird, the way you say that.
Did I?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. It did sound a little weird.
Yeah. So we're actually away together. You're not going to hear any kids running around in the background. And, we took some time specifically designed for us to spend time together to do a lot of brainstorming and thinking about our business.
Yeah.
But also to spend time together just as a couple. And that kind of led us to the topic that we're talking about today. Dating your spouse. Why are you looking at me like that?
Again, I'm not used to you being next to me. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. Do we look here? Do we look there? What are we doing? So, dating your spouse. You want to start? You want me to start?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay. You had a quote.
Yeah.
I gotta find the quote. So unprepared. All right. So you sent me a quote. It says, "A successful marriage requires falling in love many times, always with the same person." Why'd you love that quote? Why'd you send that to me?
Well, I think about... I just had a brain fart.
Classy. Very ladylike.
I think about when we go for a while without, getting out of the house or doing anything together. I definitely noticed that I don't want to call it... There's something different than autopilot. It's, when you throw kids in the mix of a marriage, it's a beautiful thing. And also, it's a different role. So it's easy to put on the mom-dad hat and forget that you're also separate from that, an individual and a couple.
Right.
And, it can be very stressful. And you're always wearing the parent hat when you're home because your kids are home.
Yeah, and even if you don't have kids.
Yeah.
We're talking about even if you don't have kids, but the way you're talking about it, what I was thinking was before the kids, it was us. When we fell in love, it was us. And so if you're not taking time away to reconnect with that, to fall back in love, even if you see that as a cliche and not literal, you're kind of ignoring the situation, the reality of why you guys fell in love.
Yeah.
I think that's important to remember, but the thing I like about the quote is this concept of falling in love over and over again. And I don't think that's a cliche saying that. I don't think it's metaphorical. I think it literally. We've had obviously ups and downs in our relationship. We've been together for a little while. And we've had times where we kind of this idea of waves. Our relationship has had better times and it's had worse times, and we've had times where we started to drift apart and we came back together.
Yeah.
And that was through conscious effort. It was through putting work in on ourselves, but also spending time together. Intentional time together. One of our big words is intentional.
Intentional.
And so if we don't intentionally do something, make time for something, put it in the calendar, schedule it, get out of the house. Even if we tried to do this in the house and lock the kids in the basement or something, I don't know what we would do to get away from them. It's not as intentional. So getting away makes it feel official. This is time for us.
Yeah.
But you can do that in little ways too. And I think that's an important thing to talk about. That's one thing that I wanted to ask you about. So these people, we always hear people who say, oh, I can't do that.
Yeah.
We say that about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And we're wrong. So it's like somebody has a really good point, and we're like, okay, well, that's a great point, but we can't do that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't work for us. And that kind of attitude is, you know, the inside the box thinking attitude hurts a lot of people. And instead of saying we can't do that, the question should be, how can we do that? Because we're away today. We're lucky enough to have somebody watching the kids who we trust, and so we feel comfortable leaving them with 4 monkeys.
Yeah.
But not all of the things that we do to date each other have to be big like that.
Yeah.
And so for somebody who says that wouldn't work for me, stop thinking inside the box and instead ask the question of how can that work for me? And so my question for you is, when we don't have somebody who can watch the kids, whether it's us or just advice for someone else, what are your thoughts about smaller ways that can still make the relationship feel important? Either some things that we've done in the past, or suggestions for people who, you know, maybe it's like a couple that has a newborn baby.
Yeah.
That, like, breastfeeding quite literally can't leave.
We've been in that stage.
Yeah. Or maybe it's someone who doesn't live near family or isn't close to family.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
Maybe they physically are close to family, but they don't have somebody who can watch their kids. They can't take a night away. What do you have for people like that? Because we've been there, but also there are other people who had it much worse than us.
Yeah. Well, I think I know this is going to sound weird, but even if you don't have family, you can find somebody. Like, there's somebody in your community that you can find to watch your kids. Back in the day when we were kids, it wasn't family was the only babysitter. Like, people hired babysitters. That's still a thing. I think our generation is less likely to hire people as a babysitter, but, like, it was a thing. Like, I never had family watch me as a kid. I had babysitters.
Yeah.
And some of them were older. So it doesn't necessarily have to be you have to rely on family. But in those moments where, like, if you're nursing an infant or you don't feel like going out, I think it's being intentional. Finding ways when, you know, there's a nap or a child is sleeping. And I know for a lot of parents, especially us, when we put the kids to bed at night, like, we're done.
Yeah.
Well, we used to say that. We're done.
It's a tough story to tell yourself because you're reinforcing it.
Yeah, because you're reinforcing it. We used to say we can't have conversations at night. But we have conversations every night now when we put the kids to bed. We have, and sometimes we have like 2-hour-long conversations, and sometimes we have 10-minute conversations. It depends on what the night and what the day brought us. But you can make it, if your marriage is a priority, you can make it a priority to have intentional conversations at night where you feel like you're taking care of your marriage, where you're being intentional with your partner.
It doesn't have to be a huge thing.
Yeah.
So first of all, it's the idea, it's the commitment.
It's the commitment. Yeah.
If you commit to spending intentional special time with your partner, it doesn't need to be some super romantic, super expensive dinner out at whatever restaurant.
Yeah.
There are ways to do it. You kind of took the tough love position. There's always a way to find a babysitter.
Yeah.
I would take okay, I'll let you have that excuse. Here are some reasons why that excuse is even with that excuse being valid, that you can't find someone to watch the kids, you can still do it, right?
Yeah.
So here's some things that either we've done or we're working on doing. Like you said, we put the kids down every night and we'll check in with each other. Yeah, there are nights where we say, I got nothing to talk about, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Right? But sometimes we'll have really good conversations, sometimes we'll have quick conversations, but it's the idea, and we talked about doing that literally for a year or two before we actually did it.
Yeah.
So when I say you have to commit, I'm not asking someone to do something I haven't done, first of all, but I'm also fully understanding of the fact that, you know, I had routines at night. I'd put the kids down. I love reading books, and I got to read all day whenever I wanted before I had kids. And so when we first had kids, it was like, no, this is the only time during the day I get to read. Like, I love you, but I don't want to talk to you. Like, let me read.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get like that. I need me time. Like, there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah.
But we talked about doing nightly conversations for like a year or maybe even 2 before we actually
2 years.
did it.
I had an alarm in my phone for 2 years, and I never deleted it or turned it off. I had it on my phone for 2 years, and I would just swipe it off.
Yeah.
And just not do it.
Brush it off. It became
for
a habit.
For 2 years.
But you can, but it's not, it shouldn't be impossible to find 15 minutes to sit down and have coffee.
Yeah.
Even in your kitchen, even if the kids are running around behind you, you can have an intentional conversation. You can do that at night.
Yeah. I have something to say about, and I'm sorry if I cut you off.
No, you're not.
There's a very big difference, though, between
Yes.
being intentional in the house and actually physically getting out of the house, because when I was talking in the beginning of this conversation about we're wearing the parent hat most of the time, so it's hard to see yourself separate as, like, your identity when you're in the house is a parent. So it's hard to look at your partner the same way sometimes because you're on autopilot. You know, you're cleaning, you're doing dishes, you're taking care of that kid, you're taking care of that kid. This kid needs that. And so even if you are trying your best to be intentional in your marriage at home, it's not the same as when you physically leave the house. Because when you physically leave the house, it's when you're like, okay, I'm not wearing that parent hat anymore.
Yes. But, dear, you're missing the point. Okay? So, the first objection that somebody's going to have to doing this is, but I can't leave my kids. Right? Mm-hmm. Whether that's valid or not, you can have a debate with people about whether that's valid. Mm-hmm. And we should, because you and I both believe that it's valid sometimes, but you can still find a way.
Yeah.
If you're committed. My point is, even if you want to use that excuse, or maybe you're not using that excuse, and it's just like, well, okay, I can only get, realistically, a babysitter once a month, and I want to do something more. So, like, we try and get away, do something like this every quarter, right?
Quarter, yeah.
But that's not enough for us.
Yeah.
Strangely, I still like you, and I want to spend time with you. So you can do small things to make the relationship a priority every day or on a regular basis.
Yes.
So don't confuse that with you need to get out of the house to make your relationship a priority. Because if we act like that, if anyone acts like that, or we give that impression, or anyone gets that impression, then that's really hard to do on a regular basis. Your relationship needs more fuel than once a month out of the house, or once every quarter out of the house, monthly dates, or whatever it is. Those are great. Mm-hmm. But you, like, 15 minutes of intentional time in the morning before someone goes off to work and the other one is stuck home with the kids. I didn't say that nicely.
No.
That shows you how I feel about being home with the kids sometimes. Is at home with the kids. That's still prioritizing the relationship. That's still intentional time saying, hey, how are you today? Or making the other person feel important and heard, or just talking. You can do that in the morning with coffee. You can do that at night. One thing that we did really, really well, I used to travel a lot for work. And what was taught or explained to me early on was this concept of taking work trips and using them as basically a vacation that's a tax write-off. Yeah. And I was like, that's brilliant. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, what about, this is how it came about actually, it was our anniversary. My creative problem-solving mind, I was in a pickle because I was supposed to go away on a work trip that was on our anniversary. And it was important. And I said, oh shit, I'm in trouble. Either I gotta get out of this at work, or I gotta find a way to make this work. And I stumbled upon this brilliant idea of trying to take you on every work trip I could.
Yeah.
And making some of our best vacations were actually work trips.
Yeah.
Some of them, not all of them.
Yeah.
But obviously, again, that requires childcare. if you're not bringing the children. But it's this outside of the box attitude. It's like, okay, well, if you commit to your relationship being a priority, to trying to fall in love with your partner over and over and over again, then you're going to find these creative little solutions. You know, can we talk on a fairly regular basis at night after the kids go to bed?
Yeah.
Even, you know, take some days off when you're exhausted. Can we talk in the morning for 15 minutes? If you don't drink coffee, you drink tea. If it's not coffee or tea, you don't drink any of that, over breakfast. If you don't eat breakfast, like, just talk to each other, right?
Yeah.
Can we do that a couple days a week? Can we find outside of the box solutions that still prioritize our relationship? The other one that we did for a long time was, we're lucky enough that your mom and my parents are pretty local and have for a while been very willing to help watch the kids. But the newborn piece, the breastfeeding newborn piece, so we both love coffee, obviously. For years, with the third and fourth kid,
back-to-back
kids, every Monday we would get out of the house together and we would have a coffee date, but we would also have a breastfeeding newborn.
So we would drive around for like 2 hours.
Right, yeah, sometimes we would drive around just so the baby wasn't screaming at us, whichever baby at the time it was. But some of our best some of the best conversations we've ever had have been drinking a coffee, driving around in a car with a baby sleeping in the back seat.
Yeah.
And, like, you can't get away from a breastfeeding newborn. I hear you. That's not an excuse that you should feel bad about. It's not an excuse that should keep you from doing this.
Yeah. Maybe
you don't have a job that allows you to do that on a Monday, but why can't you do that on a weekend?
Yeah.
So I just think, having experienced ups and downs in our relationship, but also repeatedly being committed and stubborn enough to not stop taking time away, we've also fallen back in love with back in love makes it sound like we've fallen out of love sometimes, but it
feels like that. It can feel like that sometimes, though.
But
when you're in the mix of a household, it can feel like you've fallen out of love with your partner, and it's not necessarily that. It's like, what do you say? Rainbows and unicorn farts.
Rainbows and unicorn farts. It's not all rainbows and unicorn farts.
It's not all rainbows and unicorn farts. It can feel like that, and like everything comes back to being intentional.
Yeah.
While your partner's at work, texting him, and not just texting him or her, whoever's at work, and flirting with each other.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like, the texts seem to always be like, oh my God, this kid did that, or they're driving me nuts, or I'm like something negative. But try, like, texting your partner and saying, like, I miss you, or I love you, or your butt looked nice today. Whatever. I don't know. We say crazy stuff to each other. So
yeah, also mixed in with those is like, oh my God, so-and-so had the biggest diaper today.
Yeah. I mean, those conversations are fine too.
Yeah.
But yeah. I also want to mention, like, we struggled with this in the beginning. Yeah. It wasn't...
it was more, really resisted this.
It was him.
I'll own up to that.
He was like, we don't need to go out on dates. Like, I'm fine. I'm content with being home.
I like my kids.
Yeah. And I'm fine with being home. And I was like, no, we need this for our marriage. And he was very resistant. He's very introverted. I am too. I'm more social introvert. But he was like, I don't want to go out and people, Ashley. Like, I want to stay home. I like my home. And I'm like, well, too bad. And like, we're doing this.
So understanding.
But we had to come
everybody can see why I fell in love with you now.
We had to come to, like, a compromise, though. He doesn't like going out at night, and I did. I assumed dates were at night, so that was, like, the only way we were going to date. So we had to compromise, and so when we do our monthly dates, because we do monthly dates, we go during the day. We go and do stuff during the day, and I hated that. In the beginning, I was like, no, we have to do dates at night. But I knew that I had to compromise with him because he didn't want to do the dates at all. So I was like, in order for us to get the dates in, I have to meet him in the middle.
So it wasn't that I didn't want to do the dates at all. I think what you realized was, it's not worth... like, I would have done dinner dates.
Yeah.
But it wasn't worth... It was a compromise. It was a win-win for both of us, right? It wasn't worth me being annoyed that we were going to be out in a packed restaurant waiting for however long for our food, battling traffic, getting home exhausted. Like, for me, I don't know why it's super important for me to say goodnight to my kids every night that I can. There's probably some baggage to unpack on that, but all these reasons that I could come up with to be resentful.
Yeah.
I'll do it for you because I love you, but I'm gonna be annoyed the whole time, right?
Yeah.
And so you saw that it wasn't worth that. Let's do lunch dates. You get what you want, I get a little bit of what I want. And I think that's an important point to make, because not everyone, maybe both sides of the relationship don't see perfectly eye to eye on this, or don't necessarily enjoy the same things. So then it comes down to well, what are we going to do on our date?
Yeah.
We see eye to eye on what we want to do. We just didn't see eye to eye on the time of day. I bet you a lot of couples, one person enjoys something totally different than the other person.
One.
There needs to be some kind of compromise where it's not resentful.
Yeah.
Where it's we're both committed to this relationship, and because we're both committing to spending quality time together, either we need to alternate who gets to pick, or there needs to be some kind of compromise so that it's not oh man, this sucks attitude going into it and ruins it.
Yeah.
I do want to say, going back to, I did really resist this.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons, and maybe the reasons that I was saying out of my mouth weren't necessarily the real reasons, but now I at least like it as much as you, if not more.
Yeah, you
now I'm
get
kind
excited.
of the one pushing it. I'm can we do it more?
Yeah.
And what I found is doing things pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones. For us personally,
Yeah.
doing things on our date time that are slightly or extremely out of our comfort zones is the biggest piece of growing our relationship. We had, when we went away for our anniversary a couple months ago, we had a really good conversation. We talked about what was important to each other in our relationship, and I listed off a bunch of things, and what I realized was, actually I have it written down, but I listed off a bunch of things like fun, growth, passion, respect, connection to each other. What I realized was all of those things came from adventure.
Yeah.
And so I was the one resisting, well, let's go away and do this really fun adventure type thing. And I was the one resisting that kind of thing too.
Yeah.
But when we do that, we are our relationship is so energized. I'm not saying this would work for everyone necessarily.
Yeah.
But through trial and error, I've realized the resistance to doing things like this has actually been some of the most fun things we've ever done. Some of the trips that we've taken that were entirely out of my comfort zone were the best trips in terms of fun for us, but also in terms of growth in our relationship.
Yeah.
And so I think if there's a party in a relationship that is a little bit either resistant to this idea or resistant to doing certain things, I would say give it a chance.
Yeah.
Because you might be incredibly surprised. I have some very feminine qualities about me. I'm not afraid to say that, but I'm a very masculine, manly man. Right? I have a very strong ego. I do some, in air quotes, very manly things. I have very manly tendencies, and so I don't know if it's a masculine thing to resist this, but if it's, even if it's the female in the relationship, I resisted it. I had stereotypes in my head, and I will be the first to tell people, not only is just dating, going out on intentional dates, the best thing for our relationship, but also doing the crazy, corny, stupid, adventure-y stuff that I would roll my eyes at on a Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
Has been some of the most fun stuff that we've ever done.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to go on and on about this. Just give it a chance.
Yeah. I also want to say, and back to intentional, I know this might be annoying, us saying that over and over again. When we first started, I think this was before we were even doing dates. So it was when we were very beginning pregnancy of our third child, before we weren't consistently dating. We went on a couples retreat, and they talked about, the couple that was running the retreat talked about how often they went away together and how often they dated each other. And we were like, holy moly, that's a lot.
They almost ran it like a business.
Yeah.
In terms of being intentional.
They did. But what I did notice, and it's the same thing when I take my me time for myself, is so like you get all fired up about it and you're like, oh, that sounds so great. We're going to do that. But then you go home and 1 month goes by and then 2 months and then 3 months. And then you look at each other and you're like, when was the last time we like were alone? Like without kids. So my point about this is I don't know what's going to work for you, but it's making it happen, making time for it, not finding time, making time. So we use a wall calendar still. We literally took the calendar down, and it happened to be in January, which was weird. Yeah. We took the calendar down and we didn't even ask my mom, who usually watches the kids. We just like wrote out a date for the year once a month. We wrote out a date, and then I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I know this might sound crazy, but I wrote dates out for 1 date every month. Are you able to watch the kids? And so I wrote them out for her and gave them to her, and it worked. And if there were some times that didn't work because somebody got sick or something happened, it was okay to skip that month or make that date up. But
yeah, so we didn't skip it. I think we rarely would skip it. It's the concept from time blocking. If people understand time blocking, when you time block, you start with the most important items first, right? Mm-hmm. You put them in your calendar. And the whole idea of time blocking is if you can rate it on different colors, but that top level priority things, level 1 kind of priority or whatever color, red because it's non-negotiable, it's non-negotiable.
Yeah, it's an appointment.
It doesn't mean it can't change the time, but if you have, let's say like you lose power or a tree falls through your roof and you can't leave, okay, shit happens. But that little block in your calendar gets picked up from that day and moved over here. The non-negotiables never get deleted. They just get moved. And if something needs to get deleted, it's the not quite so pressing tasks.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great point. It's non-negotiable.
Yeah, and it made it happen because it's easy to say, yeah, we're going to do this and get really excited about it. And then months just go by and you don't do it because, life happens and we're busy. But that's what made it happen for us. And just like this date, we were supposed to do this 2 weeks ago. Yeah. But one kid got sick and then another kid got sick and then I got sick. And so we had to cancel it. And I looked at him.
Reschedule, not cancel.
Yeah. I looked at him and I said, we need to call and book another trip like right away. Because if we don't do it right away, then we're not gonna do it. We're gonna forget. So here we are, 2 weeks later. Wasn't when we were originally supposed to go away,
but that's life happens. It's not the end of the world. It's we can put our relationship first or second. Yeah. Going back to the conversation, I think it was last week we had on Coffee Talk. You come first, your relationship comes second, your kids come third. We can still be good parents. We can still be responsible parents and home taking care of our sick children and put our relationship first by rescheduling, not repeatedly over and over again and it never happening like we did for so long with our nightly conversations. Yeah. But we moved that time block 2 weeks this way. Yeah. And we still put our relationship first. It made you feel important because we rebooked it. It made me feel important because we're committed to our relationship. And we can be at peace instead of resentful about our kids getting sick, whether you're resentful at your kids or the universe or how did this happen or whatever, right? It's non-negotiable. It got moved. Yeah. We're good.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah? Anything else?
No.
No?
I'm sure there is other things, but I'm not thinking of them, so.
I think, to wrap up, the first concept is commit to your relationship. Not like I'm not sure if I'm going to stay with my partner commit. Yeah. But commit to the idea that your relationship is never going to be done growing. Yeah. That you need to be dating your spouse, your partner. Yeah. You need to be falling in love with them over and over again. And you can't force that. It happens naturally. But it's also not going to happen if you're not being intentional about your time together. Yeah. You can't fall in love with someone if the only way you interact is mom and dad mode. Yeah. I love how you are as a mother, but I fell in love with you because of how you are in our relationship.
Yeah.
And so your relationship needs that kind of commitment to always growing, to always spending intentional time together. Once you make that commitment, the second point is it's non-negotiable. That's what a commitment is, right? You have to protect that. You have to be willing to think outside the box to make it happen.
Yeah.
It's okay if you have life happen to you, like we had to change the time of this. It's okay if you have life happen to you in the sense of what a beautiful thing to have a newborn baby.
Yeah.
But oh my goodness, is it a lot of work and restraints on your time? That's okay. You can still make your relationship a priority in smaller ways. Maybe you can't find time to take a night away to do a big romantic dinner. That may disappoint you. That sucks, but you can still commit to growing your relationship in normal, almost everyday ways.
Yeah. And you're not always gonna, just like me time, I don't always want to do it, but that's usually when I need it the most. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't in a great mood yesterday. I didn't really feel like doing this. He was wicked excited.
What?
I was not in a great mood. But after, a couple hours of being away, I was like, yep, we had fun.
Well, that's because you can't spend time with me without having fun.
Yeah. I did have a point that I want to make, and I left the building.
Your point wasn't how much fun I am?
No.
No. I think your point, you started off talking about, even if you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I'll add a point to that, which you think, I'll add my point.
I can't see you, Hannah, but I'm going to come.
Yeah. So even if you guys don't want to do it, even if you're in your crap mood.
Yeah.
Still doing it. So there's a fine line. Are you laughing
I'm
at
laughing
me, or
because
did you see something shiny over there?
It's like the stupid reel I made the other day. I have 9 million thoughts going on in my head.
Yeah, that reel, first of all, that reel was hilarious. If you didn't see that reel of her thought process when she wakes up, go watch it. But you woke up this morning and I was like, good morning, how'd you sleep? Trying to give you a kiss. And I've been awake for an hour and a half, so I'm ready to go. And I'm like, what are you staring at? And you're critiquing the wall, the paint color on the wall or something. I was
He's
is this what
kissing me.
Is this what you wake up thinking about?
He's kissing me, trying to be romantic.
This color is not as good in the dark as it was during the day. And it wasn't very good during the day either. I was like, okay, nice to see you too. Is this what we're going to talk about?
He was being romantic and kissing me, and I'm off staring at the paint color, being what is going on with this paint color?
All right. The point I think you were trying to make, and if you weren't trying to make this would be my point, is even if you don't, so whether it's me time, we talked about me time last week, which that was a good conversation. It's worth going back and watching. But even if you don't want to take me time, even if you don't want to, and you're in a bad mood, you had a bad day at work, and you're about to go out to dinner.
Yeah.
There's a fine line. There are times where it's listen, I'm not going to be any fun tonight.
Yeah.
I just got into it with my boss, or some a-hole just cut me off and I drove into a stop sign.
Yeah.
Okay, pick up that block, move it to next week.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. That's fine. But there are also times where, you don't want to go on me time, or like you were saying, you didn't necessarily want to do this yesterday. You weren't in a great mood.
Mm-mm.
It's a commitment. There's times where you should push through it.
Yeah.
That's a personal decision.
Yeah.
All I would say is, from experience, we've had times where we didn't want to go and we went anyways and we were totally wrong and it worked.
Yeah.
And we've had times where we didn't want to go, so we canceled it, and maybe not immediately, but pretty quickly regretted
it. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I remembered.
Is it about the paint color?
No, I remembered. It's not about the paint color. I love getting advice from older people who have been married forever. And this goes both ways with taking you time and taking time for your marriage. So if you don't take time for your marriage and you let years go by and you have kids, this is for people that have kids, and then you decide to, after 5 years of not taking care of your marriage, go on a date, you quite literally have nothing to talk about and you don't know each other, because if you're human and you're a human that's evolving and growing, you are changing. You're changing in your marriage and you're becoming different people. You are never going to be the same people who married each other. So if you go years without dating your partner, and then you decide 5 years, 10 years into the marriage that you want to start dating your partner, and then you're like, have nothing in common. Like, you see those couples now. I see couples all the time at dinner, and they're in their phones, and they have nothing to talk about because they have nothing in common. And it's because they didn't take care of their marriage from the beginning. And you'll see those couples usually get divorced, and I'm not opposed
after the kids leave.
I'm not opposed to divorce, but as soon as the kids leave, they get divorced because they don't like each other. They don't know each other, and they grew apart. So I'm growing, he's growing, and we're totally different people than the people that when we met. But we still fall in love with each other, and we still love each other because we're constantly communicating our needs. We're constantly putting the work in, and it's hard. It's not easy, but that's what marriage is.
Yeah.
Like, I don't always like him. He doesn't always like me, but it's the constant...
What?
Yeah. Sometimes I don't like you.
When? What is there about me not to like? I'm confused.
Don't even start there. But it's just like, as a parent, like, if you aren't taking care of yourself, and then your kids leave the nest, you don't know who you are. You don't know what you like, and you're completely lost. I've heard of mothers, like, they call it a midlife crisis, literally lose their minds because their kids aren't there, and they don't know what to do with themselves because all they did was take care of their kids. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be that mom, and I don't want to be that wife that is just so, what's the word for it? Codependent on...
I was going to say lost.
Yeah, lost, but codependent on my children. So that's why when we say where I come number one, he as a individual comes number one, but then our marriage is before the kids, because when your kids are gone, you're still going to be with each other, and if you're not, then you're going to end up not together, divorced or miserable for the rest of your life, and not happy.
Yeah. So I have one more point. Hannah, before I get to that, Hannah had written something in the comments.
Yeah, I know. I kind of read it.
You shoved your face up against the screen so you could read it. I have it down here. Well, first of all, she said we're cute, which is always nice. I think that was more for you than me, but I'll pretend it's for me. Also, spot on with your conversation today. It really is imperative if you want a strong relationship. And I appreciate you saying that, Hannah, because we look at you and your relationship with Sam as we love you guys. It's an inspiration to see how you guys are too. Another couple doing it your way. Obviously slight differences, but cool to see somebody else who's doing it, because then we can see someone else who has a strong relationship doing it in your way.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to add, and I think I'm saying this connected to the Hannah point because I think of you guys about this too. You talked about the hierarchy or the order. So you and I individually, separately come first.
Yeah.
The relationship comes second. The kids come third. And I made this point last week. To people who think that their kids should still come first, you still need to be taking care of your relationship and yourself.
Yeah.
Or you're not doing what you could for your kids.
Yeah.
A huge piece of what I want our relationship to be is this idea that the way that I look at you and treat you and date you and show our 4 kids what our relationship looks like, I am showing our 3 daughters the way that a woman should be treated in a relationship, and I'm showing our son the way that, well, he should be treated as a man, but also, I mean, you're more showing that piece.
I'm showing that piece.
I'm showing him how to honor a woman.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, really, men and women are interchangeable in this conversation, but how a man acts in a relationship.
Yeah.
And this concept of we're modeling it for them.
Yeah.
And so even, I'll say it in a similar way to last week, even if you think your number one priority in this world is your children.
Mm-hmm.
Like, good for you.
Mm-hmm.
I obviously would disagree.
Mm-hmm.
I think we as a relationship come first and you individually come even before that. But even if you think that your kids are your number one priority, in order to do the best job that you can for your kids, you need to be modeling a strong relationship. If we've learned anything from the past couple of years and what's going on, and even before that, this idea of a quality relationship is falling apart in our world.
Yeah.
And not just falling apart on its own, but being attacked left and right with all kinds of new crazy ways every day. We need to show in our own little world, we need to show our children a strong relationship, how to respect and honor each other, how to have fun and be fulfilled in a relationship. And I think that even if you think your number one priority in your life is your kids, you have a responsibility for those kids that are your number one priority to work on your relationship, to show them a strong relationship,
Yeah.
to show them what a strong relationship is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to hear your words when you tell them what it's supposed to be like. They only see your example when you show them what a relationship is like. And if you don't put in time to work on your relationship, you're showing them that they shouldn't put in time on theirs.
Yeah.
You're showing them the world as they think you think it should be.
Yeah.
And if you're not being intentional about your relationship, you're basically not being intentional about how you're modeling that for your kids.
Yeah.
You're saying, well, I don't give a shit about my relationship. I'll just coast through it. That's setting an example for your kids. Your kids are going to see that
Yeah.
and say, I don't even know, like, not to pick on you, but you came into our relationship not knowing what a strong relationship was because you didn't necessarily get one modeled that lasted.
Yeah.
I came into our relationship with a slightly different example. I thought I knew what a strong relationship was just because my parents are still together. But as we learn about each other and how we communicate and how our relationship should be, I continue to see, I love my parents, but I continue to see holes
Yeah.
in where they specifically communication, where
Yeah.
they didn't communicate. And I'm learning that the models that we took as this is normal, this is how things are supposed to be,
Yeah.
were not done intentionally.
Yeah.
And so, like, we can't blame our parents,
Yeah.
but our whole thing is we're breaking chains.
Yeah.
We're doing things differently. The problems that were passed down for generations are stopping with us
Yeah.
as much as we can. And one of them is we're going to be intentional about our freaking relationship.
And so that also goes with, like, what society tells us is, like, once the honeymoon phase is over, like, marriage isn't supposed to be, like you look at each other and, like, are in love with each other and then, like, aw. Like, that ends as soon as the honeymoon phase ends. And I always heard that. And, like he said, what was modeled to me was not good relationships. But I just assumed, like, you got married and then you had this, like, in-love honeymoon phase and then it ended and then you were miserable for the rest of your life. Or you got divorced. And now I know that there are bumps in the road and it goes up and down and it's not all sunshine and unicorn farts. But I also know...
Rainbows and unicorn farts.
Whatever. I know that I still look at him and I'm attracted to him. I know that I still look at him and he could be in the yard gardening or whatever he's doing and I still find myself looking at him and being like, yep, I'm in love with him. I love him. I like him. I'll keep him.
And that's not just cuz.
Yeah, that's
not a visual thing. That's not I mean, maybe a little bit it is, you're physically attracted to me, but it's more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
I think it's really big. Okay.
Anything else?
We're really done this time.
For reals?
For reals.
Super serial?
Yeah.
All right, good talk. I can't usually high five you
I know.
through the phone, but all right. Thanks for joining us today, guys.
Thank you.
We got a little bit
We're sitting
rowdy.
on the floor
I
near the bed.
I think my butt has fallen asleep.
My back hurts.
Overly caffeinated, very, very strong coffee.
Yeah.
But thank you for joining us, for putting up with Ashley's crap. I mean, it's just way out of line today. And we'll talk to you next week, Friday, 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah. Rise and shine.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Say goodbye.
Bye.
Push the button.
Bye, guys.